Folks, I just got done digging through the dustiest, crustiest, mustiest box of 80s schlock that I could get my hands on, and, well, I found something that I need to share with you guys. Now, the art of making an original horror movie with clever storytelling and interesting themes and a good cast of characters that you can bounce off of a very scary villain is an extremely difficult undertaking. And today's movie proves that sometimes it can be too difficult of an undertaking, because this movie has none of those things.
Lacey, you want to tell me all about that night when you were 3 years old.
1980's The Boogey Man is the story of a pair of siblings as they battle with the trauma of their childhood and the return of an evil entity that once possessed them into a blood-soaked trance. Sounds good, right? Just wait. The movie was written, directed, and produced by German actor Ulli Lommel and stars his then wife, Suzanna Love, and her brother, Nick Love, as the film's main protagonists. It focuses on themes of childhood trauma and suppressed rage and even faith in overcoming those things, and yet it somehow manages to do a good job of exploring exactly none of that. Truly, it's kind of remarkable how much isn't resolved by the end of this movie. Okay, so if you haven't heard of this movie, don't worry. It's not an original version of the also forgettable 2005 film or the much more memorable 2023 film. This movie is just a 1 hour and 20-minute standalone science fiction slasher which did spawn a couple of sequels that even less people have heard of. And honestly, I can't really speak to the quality of those sequels because I have not seen them. But in either case, today we are going to revisit this 1980s slasher and see for ourselves if it's true that our past never really dies. It's not that serious, it's really not. The Boogey Man opens with what will immediately become an increasingly ridiculous attempt to recreate John Carpenter's iconic opening sequence from Halloween. We get a long and eerie tracking shot that follows from the exterior of the house into the living room. We see an attractive woman on the couch entertaining a drunk man while her two young children, Lacey and Willie, watch from the porch while they're locked outside in the cold. Pretty fucked up stuff. Although I must say that the opening score of this movie kinda goes hard.
You ever done anything like this before?
Now, the mother is far more interested in her guest than she is in her kids, and the movie shows us that in the harshest possible way. We basically just see her standing there and letting her boyfriend tie up and gag her like 7-year-old son to stop them from interrupting their private time. What the fuck?
What are you looking at?
Now, mind you, this is just the first 10 minutes of the movie, so I was sitting there like, oh shit, this movie's about to be intense. But then the rest of the movie happens. Also, just when the movie started to show a little bit of promise and originality, they cut to this shot right here. I mean, so here's the deal. Lacey sees that Willie had been tied up, so she goes into the kitchen and grabs a giant knife. She uses the knife to cut Willie out of the ropes, but that's when Willie decides to take that thing into his mom's room and stab her boyfriend to death while his mother watches in horror from a reflection in a mirror. That mirror will come back into play eventually. Automatically, we're brought into the present day where Lacey and Willie are in their 20s, and Lacey is married with a family of her own. Willie is living with Lacey and the family and working on their farm, but we learn that he hasn't been able to talk since the murder all those years ago. With the past seemingly behind them, the siblings receive a letter from their mother, who they also haven't seen in many years. Mom claims that the doctor says she doesn't have a lot of time left, but that's when Lacey and Willie's trauma kicks up to haunt them again. What makes it so funny though is that in order to show the trauma that these kids went to, they just keep flashing back to like the previous scene because we're only like 11, 12 minutes into the movie so far. So all of these flashbacks are literally just snippets from what we just watched. It's hilarious. Oh, and also I love this frame right here where you can see the actress looking dead into the camera. Oof, wrong take, Ulli. Wrong take.
I know it is hard for you. All we can do is pray.
Now is probably a good time to mention that the dialogue in this movie, and the writing in general, is hilarious. It sounds like it was written with the least amount of detail possible on purpose, and there are a lot of examples of that.
Tell me, Doctor, why was she talking like that?
The mom writes the kids a letter and she basically says that she's dying soon and she wants to see her kids for one last time. And Lacey's husband thinks it might actually be a good idea because it may help Lacey overcome her past and put it behind her. To which Lacey agrees. But then they just don't do it. Like, they start to do it and then they don't do it. Lacey's husband, whose name is Jake by the way, suggests that they drive back to their hometown and visit their mom as well as visit the house that they used to live in, which is now owned by new residents, which is also kind of important, I guess. They do go visit the house, but they somehow never make it to visit her mom, which was the whole point of doing this. And they never mention, like, why or what happened. They just don't go. We never hear another line about the mom again in this entire movie. It's supposed to be the source of their trauma, and the movie sets it up to be such, but then they just forget about it. Well, you know what? I didn't forget about it, Ulli. I'll never forget about it. Just kidding. By the time this movie was over, I had almost already forgotten about it.
I don't want to remember.
While visiting their childhood home, Lacey begins having one of her trauma attacks when she sees the mirror that reflected Willie killing the man all those years ago. She shatters the mirror out of fear, which alarms the family living in the house, and Lacey and Jake take off, and for some reason, Jake decides that he needs to bring the shattered mirror and all of the pieces with him. All of the pieces, except for one. Now, in classic slasher fashion, you gotta have one or two scenes where random nothing characters that aren't connected to the main cast in any big way just get picked off. This is meant to entertain the audience and tide us over on the guts while the main conflict is building up. In this movie, they actually do some pretty interesting things with that tradition. And again, this movie is in no way original, okay? It's basically a bad version of Halloween meets a bad version of The Exorcist. However, one piece of the mirror gets left back at the childhood house, which is where we learn, say it with me folks, the mirror is evil. Ish. It's unclear what the entity exactly is, and we never see it, but it definitely breathes heavy and it glows orange sometimes. The scene where the entity kills the kids that now live in the childhood home is pretty good slasher stuff though. There's a scene where one girl has to cut her own throat with scissors, and then there's this hilarious scene where her brother creeps in on her and dies.
Boogey Man!
And then this happens to the other one. I guess that killed her. That's what did it. There is, however, a pretty excellent scene at the beach where another piece of the mirror is stuck to Lacey's son's shoe and they go fishing. And the reflection of the sun on the glass from the mirror causes these random beachgoers to die pretty gross deaths. Talk about a kiss kebab, right?
I said talk about a kid.
I would love to see a movie of just these mysterious Final Destination style deaths, but instead this scene is just a brief break from the gore fest that we're meant to be invested in. The problem is that these disposable fill characters that just get killed to fill the runtime are much more interesting than the main characters. I mean, they all lack basic motivation and unique attributes, which make everyone so 2D that it's almost distracting. Also, I don't know why I find this so hilarious, but I love that they just keep cutting back to Jake cutting the same piece of chicken over and over again. They spend like most of the movie's runtime on Jake slicing that one piece of chicken, and I'm not kidding when I say the chicken gets more runtime than the Boogeyman. So think about that before you go in. I also don't know what's going on in Willie's head for like 90% of this movie, because even though he doesn't talk, he also doesn't emote at all. But he also doesn't have any kind of physical performance, so he literally is just standing there the entire time. Look at this dumbass face he's making. It all culminates in Jake putting the mirror back together piece by piece, because we all know that's how it works. And he hangs it over the dinner table for some reason. What the fuck? The mirror then reignites the evil within it and begins picking off the main crew one by one. Listen, at this point, we are at the end of the movie. Like, there is less than 10 minutes left, and we've got no information as to what the hell this thing even is. At first, we think that maybe Willie is just a creepy little freak. I mean, he does kill his mom's boyfriend, even though we can't blame him for that. But then he like doesn't talk and he almost kills someone else. And then we think it's like the mirror possessing people, but then the mirror turns out to have like a mind and a being of its own. So where we're at is that nobody knows what the fuck is going on here, and the movie's only got about 8 minutes left to explain any of it. And wouldn't you know it, we get no information. The mirror's underwhelming kill spree takes out 2 completely meaningless characters off screen for Jake to find their bodies after the fact. But the crime scene does look kind of awesome. Lacey and Willie don't die, and neither does Jake, but then in the last 3 minutes of the movie, Lacey somehow gets like possessed by a piece of the mirror that gets stuck to her eye, and then we get this weird science fiction like trip sequence, and Jake's eyes start bleeding, and then Willie starts talking, and then all she has to do is just like pull the glass off of her face. And I think that meant that like evil was vanquished and they won. I guess. I honestly don't know. It all happens so fast. It's the last like 3 minutes of the film. So what we've got here is a swing and a miss attempt to capitalize on the unprecedented success of John Carpenter's Halloween, but with a crew that didn't have the experience, the talent, or the money to pull any of it off. There are some moments that I can have fun with, particularly if I lean into the so bad it's good perspective, but I think this may be one that we can leave dead and in the musty, dusty, crusty crates from now on. I'm gonna say 3 out of 10, you can probably skip this movie.
And while you're at it, give me another cold one.
Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this video, then you know what to do. And if you got this far in the video, please leave us a comment of any other movies you'd like to see us revisit here on JoBlo Horror Originals.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.